So for this last period, it's a Q&A or group share. So if anyone has questions about tonight or in general, or wants to share anything about their practice or their experience tonight or in general, this is just open time for that. Yeah.
I've been trying to explore what guides my decisions. Like, when do I get up? Which direction do I go? How long do I sit? How long do I stand? And it seems like it's very opaque and mysterious to me. Like it's not clear what it is. Like there are things that I can do, like I could all of a sudden decide to go stand by that tree, and whatever gives rise to that decision aside, there's just this like big open space of it being so unclear what's like guiding the movement. So I'm curious if you have anything to speak about on that general topic, your experience of that.
So the question is something like, you've been exploring what is it that decides where to go, what to look at, what to do. And it seems like a great mystery. It's opaque, hard to understand what or who or where that is. And yet there is something that seemingly we do move and pay attention to things. And so what is that? Right. As you were asking that question, I was thinking about the times at the center when we clean dishes in the kitchen. And if I can get into like a real flow state where I'm just cleaning the dishes, it's weird. I'm not consciously thinking I'm cleaning the dishes, and yet I'm cleaning the dishes, or something is cleaning the dishes. And in a weird way, it feels better and more right than if I was actively thinking about cleaning the dishes. It's more smooth and effective, and there's less resistance and conflict. What is that? I'm not really sure myself. I can say it seems to correlate with how much I'm not resisting, how much I've let go, and how much I'm just responding to whatever the circumstance or situation is. Seems like that happens more, whatever that is, in this exploration. And say in Taoism, for example, they talk about wei wu wei, or acting without acting. That the peak of any master in any field, a craft, like a master. The example they use is a butcher, but a master in any craft seemingly kind of enters a flow state and does something that they couldn't consciously do if they were thinking it through. But a true master, if they're, say, playing tennis or basketball or skiing or drawing or making art, pottery, I'm sure all of us have had sort of moments of this where it's mysterious that we're not really doing it, and yet it happens, and it's better than if we were doing it. And so in Taoism, they would say that the goal is to merge with the Tao, to become one with things, and in that way you just perfectly reflect and respond to each moment. And that was cool. And then in Zen they say there is this true person of no rank. In the eyes it's seeing, in the ears it's hearing, in the hands it's grasping. What is that? Who is that? And so it's a great mystery, as you said. And I think most of our culture and society teaches us somewhat out of necessity and out of goodness to sort of block off our natural instincts and natural way of being and adopt views and beliefs and ideas about how to do everything and what to do. And sometimes that's necessary and good, but then we can do this practice to find a more natural state where we still have the intelligence of the adulthood, of knowing things, and yet we also kind of regain this spontaneity, this freshness, clarity, just responsiveness. That's a real mystery. I don't get it. And in that way, we can act even more effectively, more compassionately, more skillfully than our discursive brains can do. So I don't know what it is. I have some bits and pieces of what is more conducive to it and what hinders it more, but it's probably better that we don't know. Satisfying? Not satisfying. Anything else? Anyone have? Yeah.
I mentioned this before I came here. I've been really, really struggling to not only remember to practice during the day when we're not sitting, but to just actually do it also. And I know that's a really big question, but I'm curious if you have, perhaps if I can make it more specific, maybe you have tips for like cues and triggers to remember to practice during the day as I'm moving, and when there isn't like a lot of motivation and willingness to do it, how to fire that up.
Right, so the question is like, outside of formal times when we're formally meditating, how do we continue practice in daily life or during the work periods, or just in life in general?
Especially in front of a computer.
Especially with digital screens. Yeah, right. I would say there's like two polar ways of how to do this. So one way would be, they say you should keep whatever the object of your focus is during a formal sitting period, you keep that through the rest of your day no matter what. So if you're following your breath, you're with your breath all the time. no matter what you're doing. Even when you're talking, you're with your breath. If you're chanting, you do a chant, a mantra in your head, you continue that mantra even if you're talking to people. Even if you're hearing other people, the chant continues going on and on and on and on. That's a pretty high level of concentration. And I think this is what most people think of when they say, how do I keep my technique going in my daily life? Is this idea of what happens on the cushion, how do I keep that going on the same way? But another pole in the practice would be adjusting your technique based on what's happening and doing whatever the thing in front of you is completely. Full mindfulness, full engagement. And so in that case, it would be if I'm cleaning dishes, I'm just cleaning dishes. I'm with the activity of cleaning my dishes, not going into what I'm going to do later, or what happened in the past, or that why did someone burn this thing and now I have to clean it up, or maybe I should go over there so that I don't have to do the thing I like, but then I'm a bad person for not doing things that I don't like or something. Just dropping all that and just doing the activity, whatever it is. If I'm typing an email, then I'm just typing the email. If I'm talking to someone, then I'm just talking to them. Being fully present, fully engaged. And so this is sort of the style that I prefer generally myself. And I think it makes more sense, at least for where we are up in Lowell at the Monastic Academy, because we do a lot of different things, and so it makes sense to adapt to different circumstances. Whereas if, say, we're in deep retreat, it makes sense that you just do this one thing completely, constantly. But out of compassion, we sort of leave this primary technique and we engage in each moment, with each situation, with each activity, and we become that activity. We merge with that activity. So it becomes less Peter is doing the dishes, and it's more dishes are happening through Peter. And ideally, just dishes are happening. Both of them have pros and cons. Both of them have benefits and costs, I would say. But we can play with both of them. One of the saints that I really like is Deepa Ma, who was a oh God, I got it wrong. What is it? She wasn't Indian. She Burmese? She wasn't Burmese. Maybe she was Indian. Anyway, Deepa Ma was this lay woman. She passed a few decades ago. She taught John Kabat-Zinn and Joseph Goldstein and all that generation of insight teachers in America. And she was a lay person who had children, she had grandchildren, and as the story goes, as I've read it, she taught she lived in this little apartment, and she taught all of her neighbors, because everyone went to her because they were like, she's amazing. I want what she has. So all the lay people went to her, and she said, all of you can practice all the time. If you're feeding your baby, then fully feel the baby feeding the baby. If you're washing your dishes, fully feel and be with washing dishes. And as the story goes, a lot of her neighbors got enlightened, doing very little retreat practice because they just had continual mindfulness in their entire life. And she was very rigorous and held a high standard of you can just continually be mindful in whatever you're doing. And in that way, we're actually cultivating a deep sense of relinquishment. We're forgetting about ourselves and we're just doing. So I'm increasingly liking the phrase, the most important right thing right now. Whatever that is. And so those are two ways. Now, there are pros and cons. if you just sort of focus on, I'm just going to do this chant, or I'm going to fully follow my breath no matter what's happening, that's really easy, in my experience, to generate a lot of tension and agitation, and that's not good. You can kind of become assholes, basically. And, you know, yeah, I think, yeah, I'll leave it at that. And then the other pole where we just merge with the activity, the shadow side of that is we're just being lazy, and we're not really doing a technique. We're just sort of being with things, but really we're just kind of not fully engaged. And that would be laziness, you know? So both kind of have shadow sides if we're not fully doing it, but we can experiment and find a way to do it correctly, fully. Does that help?
Yeah, hearing you speak, I think my main issue is just being kind of like what I said, motivated to remember. Entering the day and being like, I'm gonna practice as much as I can and carry this momentum forward. I think if I had a stronger intention in that way, then I wouldn't be so easily distracted. Does that sound right?
Yeah. Yeah. There's a lot of ways to approach that question.
I can let someone else ask a question.
This is a good question. How do you hold the right intention and keep it alive? The most important intention. I guess first and foremost, I would say living in community, having at least one good, wise, compassionate friend, at least one person in our life that we interact with on a regular basis. And luckily we have a community like this so that we can do it frequently. It's almost like a cheat code. If we have a wise, compassionate friend who's willing to give us feedback, who's willing to reflect back where we're out of integrity, who's willing to show us how to do what we don't know how to do yet, then we naturally will follow and do the right thing. It's like, I remember years ago, my one of my friends stopped kind of like eating sugar, and so I said, oh yeah, right, sugar is bad. Maybe I'll cut down on my sugar intake. Or someone says, it's ideal if it's like a live friend, but it could also be like a virtual friend or recording our books. So I listened to an Ajahn give a teaching, and he said, what have you really given up to respond to climate change? And he said, are you willing to say, stop traveling on airplanes for entertainment? And I went, oh, I haven't done that yet. And so when we're around good spiritual friends, when we're around wise friends who can both be a role model, who can both give us feedback and reflect ourselves, and also give us instructions, we naturally will follow the path. And so it's very important to have, ideally alive, but it could be a dead book or something, but ideally a live, real spiritual friend. And as the Buddha said, it's better to go it alone than have bad friends, but ideally you have wise friends. I'll leave it at that. There's a lot more I could say, but I'll leave it at that. Yeah, what's up?
We were talking before about this lady who had mindfulness in every moment.
Right.
caring for the baby. To what extent do, being a layman, do people who practice a lot of mindfulness achieve being in the moment outside of the mindfulness practice without being concerned about something else in that moment? Planning or thinking of your partner while doing the dishes, or thinking about, oh, I'm missing out on this, or I should actually be doing that.
Right. So the question is, for a layperson, to what extent is it sort of, can you maintain mindfulness while also having these other concerns and
exactly, to what extent can someone achieve mindfulness while being in daily tasks? To what extent is someone really concerned of washing the dishes or cooking or working or writing an email or whatever it is?
Right. Well, so the teacher I was saying was Deepa Ma, and my understanding of her teaching was she would probably say anyone can do that, layperson or not. And even in the Buddha's time, there were a lot of lay people who achieved great awakening practicing themselves. Also, I would maybe make a distinction around what we commonly think of as mindfulness and mindfulness, I guess. And so it's possible to be mindful and still plan, for example. Or it's still possible to be mindful and have a conversation. And, you know, I'm not an expert in this field, but, you know, there's a lot of studies that say, like, multitasking, which in my generation was a huge thing that was celebrated. I remember in 6th grade, I wrote a paper how multitasking is good, and my generation's really good at multitasking and all that. But, you know, studies have found actually that multitasking is bad for you. It makes you less productive, makes you less effective. It's actually better to just focus on one thing at a time. And so I wouldn't say mindfulness has to mean I don't think, or I don't plan, or I don't have feelings or something, or I don't talk to people. That's what a retreat setting, a silent retreat, often looks like. But that doesn't have to mean that's what mindfulness always is. And a lot of people use the word mindfulness, so it's kind of almost lost its meaning at this point of what it actually means. Kind of like the word yoga or something. So if I was giving my definition right now, which is liable to change, and I will not sign this for the rest of my life, but the definition right now, I would say mindfulness is being aware of what you're doing while you do it, and the ability to bring your attention back to whatever you deem important, whatever you deem what you want to focus on in that moment. And so we can train the skill of both being aware of what am I doing as I'm doing it, and because I have that skill, I can be aware of whether or not I'm focusing on what I evaluate to be the most important thing right now. So if I'm following my breath, then am I following my breath or not? And if I'm not, I can bring my mind back to the breath. If I'm writing an email, I'm aware that I'm writing the email as I'm writing the email. And notice if I start going onto Facebook or checking my text messages or something, I bring myself back to the email. But for a lot of us, we're often doing 10 different things at the same time, and very quickly context switching back and forth between these different things, and not really fully present, and really a lot less effective in whatever we're trying to do. So if that's the definition of mindfulness, I would say that everyone could do that all the time with practice. and it's a lot. Once it actually works, it's really nice. I was talking to one of the residents, and I said, they do a lot of running. So I was saying, you know, when we first start running, I don't like running. When we first start running, it really is painful and uncomfortable, and it's not fun. If I prioritize comfort and ease, then it would be a lot more comfortable just sitting at home, not running. But then there is this wellness and health and like exhilaration once I get past the pain period and I'm just running. And I'm aware that I'm running, I'm not thinking about other things, I'm just enjoying the run. And then it feels great. And so similar with mindfulness practice, initially there's these hindrances, thinking about other stuff, and it feels painful, and yeah, that can last minutes or hours or whatever, depends on the situation. But then it eventually can feel good and feel great, exhilarating, and it doesn't have to be a chore. It's like, oh, I'm really present with the flower. This is great. Why do I never spend time with plants, you know? Or I'm really in a conversation with someone. This is great. So it's not like mindfulness has to be like a chore that we're doing so that we become better people or something. Although that's a good motivation, but it can be and ought to be eventually at times really fun and great in and of itself. The problem is that pain period, just like in running, where you have to get through the inertia of not wanting to put in effort because our bodies want to optimize for laziness or something. So it's a challenge. It's still a challenge for me, you know. Not gonna say I'm mindful 24/7 or anything. So, but yeah, I think it's definitely possible. 100%. Mm. Tony?
Yeah, Peter, I just wanted to comment on how grateful I am that we're having this now here like this. It's been a while, and on your retreat, I don't know if it's my imagination, but I think I see it in you. I think that your journey was fruitful. You seem there's something like shifted for sure. I don't know if it's a grounding or if it's confidence or something, but there's something that I feel that it was. You came out the other side of that retreat changed in a positive way. And what kind of, when you were sharing about what was going on, you were sharing about like becoming willing, and then you said something about like you were kind of curious why you wouldn't be willing to be joyful. And I found it like, for whatever reason, I don't know if it's outside influences, what's going on in the world, but I have been finding myself not being as joyful as I'd like to be. You know, maybe it's my practices and all that great, I don't know, but it just, and by nature, I'm a joyful person. So maybe it's possible there's something that's would be a good thing for me to meditate on. And what is it going on with me? Why I am not allowing myself to be joyful.
Right.
Certainly, and then the mortality thing too. I'm a little older. You know, I'm 67 years old, and I've faced my mortality before in the past, and I can identify with that. You know, facing your mortality. And I don't think I have an issue with like the fact of life that I'm going to die, facing my mortality. I don't have a issue with that at all. Anyways, it's just good to be here. It's I kind of feel like it's very nice to be connecting with the community here. And good to hear about your story about your retreat. Thank you.
Thanks, Tony. It's a real blessing to have you as a friend and be part of this. I would say if I can give another endorsement for mindfulness or this practice or this community, I would say that in these kinds of times, finding a way to be happy for no reason, not because we bought something or because we read something or because someone gave us something, but just kind of like being with one of these plants and just being alive and being satisfied just with that is a revolutionary act in these days where everyone wants. There are a lot of systems that want us to be enslaved and get only gratification and happiness from other means. And so reconnecting with this basic joy is a great, both a source of wisdom, but also frees us from being enslaved from the systems that try to grab a hold of us. And hope we can all find that joy in ourselves and share that with each other.